Hello, my name's Julia and I run a small sewing business called Bobbins and Buttons, which is based in Leicester in the UK. I started teaching sewing classes in 2013, which has given me lots of food for thought and ideas for video tutorials. So this is my first video tutorial. Right, today I'm going to show you how to apply a neckband to a jersey top or dress. The reason I decided to show you this technique today is because my latest business venture is designing sewing patterns, and the last 3 patterns in fact that I've launched have all had a jersey neckband, so I just want to show you a couple of examples before I show you the technique. So just before I show you how to apply the neckband, I just wanted to show you a couple of examples. You'll always find that the neckband is a fair bit smaller than the neck edge, as you can see here in the one that we're going to make up in this tutorial. The reason for this is so that it sits nice and flat when it's on the body, but this is the part that can make it slightly tricky to apply, but hopefully after this tutorial you'll find it a bit easier. This is my first example. This is the Lynne Sweatshirt. You can see here that this is made in a soft brushed back heavyweight sweatshirt that doesn't have that much stretch, and because of that I've used a separate fabric which is like a rib fabric, which has also got elastane in it so that it stretches on to the neck edge, and you can see how it sort of pulls it in slightly and sits nice and flat once it's stitched on. This is the Angie t-shirt, which is a ladies wear semi-fitted t-shirt, and as you can see this one's made with a lot lighter fabric, and because of that, and because it's also got a good 4-way stretch, you can use the same fabric to create the neckband. And this is a nice slightly scoop neck shape. The pattern also has a crew neck, and both are finished with the neckband. And just before, one last thing I want to show you is this striped version of the Angie top. Again, because we've got the stretch, the 4-way stretch in the fabric, I've used the stripes cut on the other way to give quite a nice decorative finish on the neck edge there. So the first part of preparing the neck band is, obviously I've sewn the shoulders together and I've sewn the neckband together here. So the first part is we need to quarter both the neck edge and the neckband. So I'm going to start by quartering the neck edge. So to do this we're going to start at the shoulder point, and we need to pull the neck edge into half. So gently pull the neckline into half like this. At this point I always say just ignore the seam lines, just think of it as a whole circle with no seam lines because they can be a bit distracting, but we are starting from this shoulder seam. So when you're comfortable, you've got this into half, we're going to put a small nick into the front neck, which is the halfway mark. And the reason why I like to do nicks is you can see them on both sides of the fabric, but you do have to be quite careful not to do nicks that are going to be too big, because you don't want to end up with a hole in your seam line. So once we've got the halfway marks marked there, we can bring those 2 marks together. So the halfway mark you just created with the small nick and the shoulder seam you originally used, bring those together and gently pull the neckline again to make your quarter marks. So again we're going to do a small nick here. You just literally want about 2 or 3 millimeters so you can just see the nick, and that's your quarter marks on the neck edge. So we're going to do the same thing with the neckband now. So we've got it laid nice and flat, with starting at the seam where you've joined it. We're going to place a small nick at either edge of the neckband, just like that. If you don't feel comfortable doing the nicks, you can always use a chalk mark or place a pin at that point, but you need to mark both edges. So now we've got those 2 marked, we're going to bring the halfway marks together. So we've got the seam and the halfway mark, and again do a small nick at marking the quarters at both edges. There we go. So now we've got the quarters marked on the neckband and on the neck edge. I'm going to show you how to apply this both with the overlocker and with a normal sewing machine. So now we're going to put the neckband onto the neck edge. This is where obviously it gets slightly more tricky because you've got to fold the neckband in half and we need to match each quarter point. So I've started here. I quite like to use these clips because they're easily moved, and if you're going to overlock as well, you can definitely see them. You definitely don't want to get pins involved in overlockers, that could cause a bit of damage. So I'm bringing those two little marks together and finding the next mark on the neck edge, which is here. So I'm just going to start by placing a clip, placing those three marks, the neck edge marks and the neckband marks together. Can you see how that is a bit more slack? That's what we need to pull on to make the neckband fit. So we're going to go all around the neck, matching each set of marks together. Yeah, that's a very tiny one there. So you've got all four marks matched. So if you feel confident at this stage, you can go straight to the sewing machine or the overlocker and just start sewing between those points, quarter points on your neckband, just pulling as you go. But if not, I do recommend that you tack it. I like to tack using a traditional hand needle and thread for this particular technique. So let's just start here. You can keep the stitches quite big, but the trick to getting a nice finish here is you've got to keep your seam quite even, and you need to stretch that between. So you've got to keep, when you're sewing, you need to keep those three edges all together at the same time, which can be a little bit tricky. So as we're tacking, we can just pull. You can do quite big stitches. It doesn't really take as long as you think, but you've got that nicely in place then to take it to the machine. So our first pointer there. Right, so that's all tacked on now, so I'm going to show you how to overlock this one on. Okay, a couple of things just before I start sewing that I want to say about this is I've got the overlocker set up on 4 threads, which makes a stronger seam, which I quite like to use for neckbands. And also I'm working with the neckband on top, which is the part which needs to be pulled, but obviously with the tacking we've got this fairly well stabilised. We've got the three edges nicely together there, so we should just be able to keep sewing. On this particular pattern it's a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and the width of the sewing stitch for the overlocker is just over 1/2 centimetre, so I'm going to take off a little bit as I sew, but not too much, to give me the 1 centimetre seam allowance. So I'm just going to start sewing that now. So there we go. So if this tail end of your overlocking bothers you, you can thread a wide-eyed needle and just push that back into the stitching along here, or they're pretty secure, you can just trim it off. And there we've got a nice neat neckband. So I'll press that now and show you the finished look. So this neckband is, I've prepped up exactly the same as the one I did with the overlocker. The only difference this time is we're going to just use a regular domestic sewing machine. And also I haven't tacked this one. This is for when you're feeling a bit braver, you can just sew it without tacking it. There's a couple of things to think about when you're using a normal sewing machine. One is make sure you change your needle to a ballpoint or a stretch stitch needle, and secondly use a stretch stitch. I like to just use a classic zigzag stitch. It wants to be quite, not too shallow but fairly long. Basically you want the neckband to stretch with the fabric. If you use a straight stitch, obviously it will snap, the stitching will snap as you pull it, and with a fairly fitted neckband like this, it needs to, as you pull it on over your head, you'd end up snapping the stitches. So I'm just going to start sewing it now. Again, we're observing the 1 centimetre seam allowance and sewing around the edge. At that first point I'm now stretching it, making sure those edges are nicely matched up, and stretching it as I sew this time. And there we go, all the way around. Obviously without overlocking, you've got this raw edge which won't fray, so it's not a major problem. But if you wanted to neaten that up, you could do a second row of zigzag stitching right on the very edge. And for a final flourish, if you like, you could do twin needling just to hold that seam back, or again use a zigzag stitch around the edge underneath the neckband just for another little neat finish. And there we go, another neckband. Thank you for watching this YouTube video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel.